You're listening to Systemic Era Podcast. The failure was designed.
Elections have consequences. Endangered Republican turns tail on Trump, based on an article by Matthew Rarsa. Housing on the table. Democracy on the rack. The article's real subject. A Republican lawmaker, Lawler, openly broke with Donald Trump over housing affordability and backed up a bipartisan bill he says tackles supply, capital access, and costs. Same reporting also shows Trump allies defending his dismissiveness, while Republican lawmakers complain he is tying housing legislation to the Save America Act, a voting law push that critics say would suppress turnout. The visible issue is housing. The actual story is power, who gets to set priorities, who is forced to defend them, and who pays when politics is used as leverage. Trump holds the leverage. The institutional center of gravity here is not Congress, not housing advocates, and not the voters struggling with rent and mortgage costs. It is Trump. He can casually downgrade a housing bill, then force Republican lawmakers to spend their political capital chasing his election law demands as a condition for moving popular policy. That is not confusion. That is command. Lawler's complaint makes the hierarchy obvious. He wants the housing bill signed. Trump gets to decide whether a bill with bipartisan support becomes a governing achievement or a hostage in someone else's agenda. This is how an executive turns legislative policy into a loyalty test, make the public good contingent on submission. The misdirection machine. The reporting contains a familiar trick. It gives oxygen to a defensive performance by Trump's surrogates, then lets them drift into election denial euphemisms dressed up as confidence and trust. Oaken Diddley's attempt to recast Trump's posture as a political win collapses into the same old fraud mythology, just with cleaner packaging. The point is not persuasion. The point is to keep the lie circulating until it becomes background noise. That is why the piece should not be read as a fight over policy details. It is a story about how deliberate sabotage gets narrated as a strategic disagreement. Trump is not merely dismissing housing. He is using a popular issue as a bargaining chip while his allies sanitize their underlying goal: election control. The lawmakers know better. The most revealing voices here are the Republican ones who admit the problem without naming it too sharply. Lawler says housing affordability is a serious issue and celebrates a bipartisan bill. Sen. Darmtillis goes further, calling the SAFE Act push an impossible task and warning against undermining confidence in elections. That matters because it strips away the usual excuse that this is all an advertence for internal debate. These lawmakers know the timeline is unrealistic. They know the housing issue is politically useful. They know the election law demands are a drag on governance. And still the party continues to orbit Trump's priorities. That is institutional cowardice, not strategy. The article's framing is weak in one important way. It risks presenting this as a split inside the GOP over policy substance. It is more than that. The split is over whether the party will keep subordinating governing to Trump's need for control. The real objective. Dan Vicini's argument from Common Cause gives the story its clearest political meaning. The point of the election law push is not administrative reform, but insulation from accountability. That claim is an interpretation, not a courtroom finding, but it fits the pattern in the source. When a leader whose movement has spent years delegitimizing elections demands new voting restrictions before signing unrelated legislation, the structure is hard to miss. The Save America Act is described here as something that critics say would disenfranchise millions and as a measure that lacks the votes to survive a filibuster. yet it remains useful as leverage. That is the game. Even failed measures can discipline allies, shape media coverage, and convert ordinary governance into a spectacle of submission. A system, not a gap. This is the deeper pattern. Trump's politics do not treat public policy as a set of solvable problems. They treat it as a reservoir of bargaining chips for power maintenance. Housing affordability becomes secondary to election manipulation. Legislative cooperation becomes a loyalty test. The public is asked to accept this as normal because the alternative is admitting that the governing party is being used to secure one man's political insulation. That is the story beneath the clip, the laughter, and the staged defensiveness. The country is not watching a messy policy argument. It is watching a faction use popular needs as currency while trying to weaken the very mechanisms that would hold it accountable. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to AlterNet for today's article. With the automated voice of Riza, thanks for listening.